This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. This is a finance show for small business owners about money, how it works in our business and personal lives, and how we can build wealth to be financially independent. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread. Today is episode number 40. Today, I have the privilege and the honor to introduce you to a friend of mine named Ben Wells. Now, Ben is an attorney, so don't hold that against him. He's an attorney at law located in the Cincinnati area. And you've heard me on the show talk about how a powerhouse attorney can help you in your business planning. Now, Ben's special because he's also a fellow CEPA. He and I actually attended the Certified Exit Planning Advisor class together in Chicago. Now, the reason why I've asked Ben on the show today is because Ben specializes in one particular area. And candidly, this is not a strong suit of mine. He specializes in the area of ESOPs. And I mentioned this ESOP briefly in episode number 29. And I had many people reach out to me and said, Justin, man, that's an amazing idea. Tell me more about this employee stock option plan. So I reached out to Ben. I know this is his area of specialty. I said, Ben, I really need to have you on the show. He obliged. He's here with us today. I can't tell you how I'm excited to have Ben here with us. So with that introduction, Ben, welcome to the Financially Simple Podcast.
Thanks, Justin.
So Ben, let's jump right into this thing, man. I need you to explain to me in the easiest layman's terms. Remember, I'm an old country boy from the swamp. What in the world is an ESOP?
So, first of all, the letters stand for Employee Stock Ownership Plan, and it's a way for a business owner to sell his or her business to the employees. And it's been around since about 1974, at the time that a law called ERISA was adopted. And the idea behind it was that regular rank and file employees have a hard time accumulating wealth.
Right.
And so Congress felt that by giving some tax advantages to business owners who are willing to sell their business to their employees, it would help promote the spread of wealth among the working class and also give business owners a great opportunity to sell their business in a very tax-advantaged way. So ESOPs have been around since 1974, and they've gotten more and more popular every year as more and more people find out about what a great deal they are, not only for the employees, but also for the business owners who want to sell.
So they've been around for a while. So we're not talking about things that are new and up and coming, things that are just, we're chasing rabbits here to try to figure out some creative tax initiatives. These are well-established plans. The service is familiar with them. We're not pulling things out of a cookie jar with this.
Exactly. This is not a cutting-edge idea. This is something that's been around for years and years and has been very popular, although it's not as widely known as it probably should be. There's currently around 10,000 ESOPs in the country. There's new ones being formed all the time, and occasionally some are terminated because the business may be sold to a larger company. But they've been very popular, and we continue to do new ESOP transactions all the time.
10,000 doesn't seem like a big number, Ben. Compared to the number of 401ks or 403bs and things of that nature, it seems relatively small. Why do you think that is?
That's a good question, and I get asked that question a lot. I think that there are a few reasons that we can go into as we talk more about the details, but I think part of the reason is that business owners in general just don't know enough about ESOPs. There are some organizations that promote them and encourage owners to establish ESOPs, but when compared to the M&A market and the network of investment bankers and business brokers who are actively out trying to get businesses sold, either to a strategic or a financial buyer, it's just not something that's publicized as well.
So with that being said, we've already covered on the show what strategic buyers are, financial buyers. We talked about M&A and investment bankers. And this particular animal, the ESOP, as I'm going to call it, who is a candidate for this thing, Ben?
All kinds of businesses can be good candidates. We've done ESOPs in service businesses like architectural and engineering firms, manufacturing companies, government contractors, almost any business you can think of. But the thing that they have in common is, first of all, the business has to be able to support some leverage because the business does take on debt at the time that the ESOP is established. So it needs to have a fairly steady cash flow and needs to, of course, to be profitable. The other factor that helps with establishing an ESOP is if you have a good, strong management structure in place. A business that is really a one-person shop tends not to be a great candidate for an ESOP because ultimately the goal is to transfer ownership to the employees as the original entrepreneur or the current business owner retires. So that person can continue to work, that is, the business owner can continue to be involved for several years afterwards and can continue to have control over the business. But ultimately, you need that next generation in place to take over as the original owner becomes less and less involved.
Okay, that's a mouthful. I'm going to unpack that a little bit, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we talked about it can be just about any size business, preferably not, obviously it's not going to be a one-man band. You mentioned service businesses, widget producing businesses. You mentioned teams here. So if I kind of ask the question differently to you to try to get my thinking caught up with where your mind is. Let's say I'm a business owner with 15 to 20 plus employees. First of all, is my 15 to 20 plus employees, is that a good threshold for me to consider? Do I really need to have 200 employees? Do I need to have 3 employees? Is there an education level that's needed? Is there a specific cash flow? Help me quantify or qualify exactly who is the bare minimum for just candidate.
So we've done a number of ESOPs, at the level of 15 to 20 employees. I'd say that's probably on the small side. We usually like to see some pretty robust level of earnings. So thinking for most transactions, you're looking at a business that has $1 million in earnings a year or more. And that's before.
We're talking about earnings, not gross revenue.
Right. And we've done them smaller than that, but they are fairly complicated to set up. So they're not good for just your little mom and pop corner business. Okay. You need to have something that is substantial enough to have, as you said, 15 to 20 employees or more, and some good second-tier management in place who has the ability to come in and run the business at some point.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the beginning introduction on this where we talked about the ESOP, and you made the mention that the idea is ultimately for the owner of the company or owners of the company to transfer ownership of the company to the employees. In that transfer, are there certain criteria on the employees? Are they rank and file? Are they HCEs or highly compensated employees for those listening to this podcast? Is there criteria on the employee side of things for those who participate in buying out the owner?
It's actually a little bit of a misnomer to say that it's an employee stock ownership plan because technically the employees don't own the stock. When you sell to an ESOP, you're selling to essentially a retirement plan, like a 401k plan. So what an ESOP is really, it's organized as a trust under the law, which means that it's essentially an account that's held by a trustee for the benefit of the employees. So when you sell your business to an ESOP, you're really selling it to the trustee. And that person or trust company will negotiate the deal on behalf of the employees and then will hold the stock once the ESOP is established for the employees' benefit. So what that means is the employees, even though they have an ownership stake in the company, They don't have a right to vote the shares. They don't get to elect the board of directors. They don't really get a say in how the company's run. But they do get the benefit of owning the shares, and when they retire, they have a right to get a payment based on what those shares are worth.
Okay. I'm going to try to stay out of the weeds that you and I can quickly jump into on this type of subject. And you know how nerdy
Sure.
we as professionals. So one thing that I had a question on in particular that I'd like to address as high level as possible was, so Ben, I've got this company and I think it's worth X. Let's say $10 million. I think it's worth X. Can I list my price to that trust? I'm assuming there's a trustee involved, the person who controls the trust. Can I tell the trustee, hey, look, I know my company's worth $10 million. The ESOP needs to pay me $10 million for my share in the company so these employees can have benefit in this?
That's how the deals get done. The nice thing is, as a business owner, first of all, you get to pick the trustee. And there's a number of people out there that do it. We usually interview a few, and then you pick the one that's most compatible. Then you negotiate a deal with the trustee. And if you want to get $10 million from the business, it's like any other negotiation. You may say, I'll sell it for 12, and he'll come back and offer 8, and then ultimately you agree on 10. So then at that point, the trustee owns the business, but under the agreement, you'll still, if you want it, still have the opportunity to run the business for really as long as you want to stay around. And the trustee likes that because they don't want anything to happen to make the business not successful, because then it won't be worth as much.
So in this illustration that we're painting for everybody here, if I think my business is worth 12 and the trustee thinks it's worth 8, and ultimately I sell it for $10 million to the trustee, does that mean that I receive $10 million day one? Or how do I end up getting that $10 million to myself so that I can now retire?
Very seldom are you going to walk away with $10 million if you sell to an ESOP. There's 2 ways to structure it. One, you can get a promissory note from the ESOP. In other words, it'll promise to pay you the $10 million over a number of years after the transaction. Secondly, you can go to a bank, and in this case, the company would go to the bank and borrow part of the purchase price. Banks are familiar with these loans, and there's a number of banks that have a specialty of doing ESOP loans. The company will be able to borrow part of the purchase price, normally around 40%. And that money will be paid to you as a business owner at the time that you sell to the ESOP. Then the rest of the purchase price will come from a promissory note that you get from the company. Now, why would you do this as opposed to some other kind of transaction? Well, it's worth noting that if you sell to an ESOP and the ESOP elects S corporation status, and I assume you've talked about S corps versus C corps, the income of the corporation passes through to the ESOP. The ESOP is tax exempt, so it doesn't pay any tax after the ESOP buys the business. And so you've basically freed up all of the company's income from any kind of tax obligation. So that means there's a lot more cash available to pay you as the owner. So we find often that in an ESOP transaction, the amount of money that's saved in taxes is enough to basically buy the business from the owner. So from a cash standpoint, it's a really great device, as long as an owner, you're patient and can be paid over 4, 5, 6 years instead of getting everything at the closing.
If I heard you right, and maybe I didn't, again, I'm not the expert here in this area.
Yeah.
If I sell my company to the ESOP plan, you just gave me a time frame of more than likely I'm going to have to wait 4, 5, 6 years plus before I receive full payout of my transaction. Is that fair?
Yep, that's typical.
Okay. And in doing so, in selling my company to the ESOP, the trust of the ESOP, my company is going to benefit. If it's an S corp status, it's going to be very advantageous tax-wise for me and the company.
Right.
So with that, who would not do this? Why would I not choose to go this route?
That's a great question. And I get asked that sometimes when we talk about ESOPs because people are surprised that, they haven't heard about it before. Let me just quickly say our typical business owner that we see in an ESOP deal is somebody who is, maybe 10, 15 years from really retiring. They want to stay involved in the business for a while, but they want to take a little money off the table. And so if your goal is, hey, I want to sell right now and move to an island in the Caribbean and never think about work again, you're probably not a great candidate for an ESOP because, as we discussed, you're probably going to have to wait a few years to get paid. In that instance, you're probably better off selling to a buyer that can give you cash at closing. Otherwise, if you want to stay involved in the business for a few years, and a lot of owners do, if you're concerned about preserving your legacy, if you want the business to stay in your community and you want your employees to continue to have jobs and so forth, ESOPs are a great option because an ESOP company isn't going to move. Typically, it's not going to close as long as it continues to operate profitably. And as an owner, if you want to stay involved in the business, you'll be able to stay involved as long as you want to.
So that leads me to two questions. The first one is, let's go back to our illustration that we laid as a baseline. I'm the business owner. I just sold my company to the trust for $10 million. Now I'm looking at staying with my company for, let's say, 10 years. But over that 10 years, Ben, if my company's worth $10 million today, I'm expecting if I'm still here working as a business owner, my company should be worth more in the future. Did I just give up all of my potential long-term earnings as the business grows?
Not necessarily. It depends on how you structure the sale. And without getting too much into the details, there are ways that a business owner can sell to an ESOP but still participate in the growth and the value of the business. One of the ways that we do that is as part of the financing, the owner will get warrants from the company. And a warrant's really just the same as a stock option. That is, you get a right to share in the growth and value of the stock over time. And so if you get warrants as part of the financing and the business goes up in value, you'll get some of that. You'll have to share it with the employees, of course, because they also own an interest in the business. But if an owner wants to continue to be really involved and run the business and wants the right to participate in that upside, they'll be able to do it.
Okay. So that leads me to my last big question here. How much does this cost, brother? I mean, are we talking hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars? Am I going to lose all my profitability to paying attorneys and accountants and everything else? Or is this legitimately where I can walk away with $10 million in an illustration?
I'll be honest with you. It's a complicated transaction. There's a couple of sets of lawyers involved. There's bankers involved. There's a trustee involved. You have to hire a valuation firm. All those people get paid. So it's not free and it's not cheap. But when you compare it to the cost of other types of sales, if you're going to use an investment banker to market your company for sale, you're going to have to pay that person a pretty significant fee. If you're going to do a leverage recap or other transactions, there's fees involved in those. So there's no free lunch on any of this stuff. But because of the significant tax advantages involved, we find that an ESOP in the long run is very competitive in producing some great results for business owners. And if we had more time, I could go through some examples of where business owners have looked at both a sale to a strategic buyer, a sale to a financial buyer, and an ESOP. And in lots of cases, the ESOP comes out not only a little bit on top, but way on top.
So you did mention time when we're wrapping up here. We're getting our time limit for both you and I and our businesses. So let me ask you this last question. Let's say I'm a business owner in Texas and you're in Cincinnati or you're in Washington, D.C., your two primary locations that you're actually in office at. Can I hire you if I'm in Texas?
Absolutely. The ESOP world, that is the world of ESOP practitioners, is a small one. And so it's really a national practice. We're dealing with federal law, not state law for the most part. So the expertise transfers across the country, and we're involved in ESOP transactions across the United States. If there's an issue where we need local counsel for, a corporate issue, or if there's a real estate issue that we need to get into that involves state law, we can hire local counsel, or my firm has lawyers who are admitted in almost every state in the country. And so we usually have that expertise available.
So, Ben, with that, how can people reach you? Is it best if they just reach through your firm? I know you're a partner in your firm. Is that the best way? Just go to your website?
Yeah, they can go to www.dinsmore.com, and there's a real nifty attorney search there. Just type in Wells, and my bio will come up.
So what I'm going to do, folks, in the show notes, I'm actually going to put a link just to Ben's bio. And I've already gone to his website. They got a really slick website here. And I'm going to recommend, if you have any questions, or if you think based on the content today that you might be a candidate and you're working with a good financial planner, a good certified public accountant, maybe even an attorney who doesn't really know these things, reach out to Ben through his website. So, Ben, we're out of time. Any other thoughts that we need to cover before we sign off here?
No, Justin, I think we covered it pretty well. I would just say that, just to follow on what you just said, if any of your listeners are interested, I'm always happy to talk. There's no obligation, no charge for just a phone call. And if they want to discuss whether or not they're a good candidate for an ESOP, how's it work, what's it cost, what all is involved, I'm always happy to have that conversation.
Well, with that, Ben, I thank you for coming on to the show today. I appreciate it. Brother, I'll see you very soon. And with that, we're going to sign off on this day's episode. And like I always say, life is hard, life is complicated. Business, money, it doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, folks, y'all go out and make it a great day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.